The wedding dress smelled like someone else's life. Alara Voss stood in the cramped back room of the general store, staring at the faded ivory fabric that hung on her frame like a lie. The bodice was too tight. The hem dragged in the dust. Somewhere in the years since this dress had been new, its original owner had probably smiled, had probably meant the words she spoke at the altar. Alara wouldn't even get that mercy. "Stop fidgeting!" Her brother's voice cut through the silence, sharp and impatient. Thomas stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her the way a man watches livestock before market. "You'll wrinkle it." She wanted to laugh, wrinkle it, as if that mattered, as if anything about this day was about her. "Thomas." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You don't have to do this." He looked away. That was answer enough. "I'm your sister, and I'm out of options." His jaw tightened. "The debt's real, Alara. Crowley doesn't wait, doesn't forgive. You think I want this?" "I think you found a solution that doesn't cost you anything." The words landed like a slap. Thomas flinched, but he didn't argue. Couldn't. Because they both knew the truth. He'd gambled away their parents' farm, borrowed money from men who collected in blood, and when the reckoning came, he'd offered up the only thing he had left. Her. "Rowan Hale's a decent man," Thomas said quietly. "He won't hurt you. He's a stranger. He's paying off my debt. That makes him family." Lara turned back to the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked hollow. 23 years old and already used up, traded away like furniture. Her dark hair had been pinned into some approximation of elegance, but loose strands escaped at her temples. Her eyes, green, her mother used to say, like spring grass, looked dull now. Winter eyes. Frozen over. She thought about running, just walking out the back door, into the street, into the hills beyond town. But she had no money, no horse, nowhere to go. Thomas had made sure of that. Sold everything that wasn't nailed down to cover his debts. And when that wasn't enough, he'd sold her too. 5 minutes, Thomas said, pulling out his pocket watch. "Preacher's waiting." Alara closed her eyes, took a breath, then another. This was survival, that's all it was. People did worse things to stay alive. She picked up the small bouquet someone had left on the chair. Wildflowers, probably picked that morning, already wilting in the heat. They felt like a joke. Like someone was playing at tradition when everyone knew this wasn't a real wedding. It was a transaction. Thomas opened the door. The church was small, wooden, built by miners who'd long since moved on to richer claims. Only a handful of people sat in the pews, curious townsfolk who had nothing better to do on a Thursday afternoon than watch a woman get bartered away. Alara recognized some of them. Mrs. Whitmore, who ran the boarding house, the blacksmith's wife, a few ranch hands she'd seen around town, and at the front, beside the preacher, stood Rowan Hale. Alara had seen him exactly twice before today. Once, 3 weeks ago, when Thomas had introduced them outside the saloon. Rowan had tipped his hat, said something polite she couldn't remember, and left. The second time was when he'd come to finalize the arrangement, standing in Thomas's rented room while her brother counted out the terms like she wasn't even there. Now, seeing him at the altar, Alara tried to find something to hold on to, some detail that might tell her who this man really was. He was tall, lean in the way men get when they work hard and eat little. Somewhere in his early 30s, though the sun had aged his face into something older. His hair was dark, cut short. His clothes were clean but worn, a dark jacket that had seen better years, trousers tucked into scuffed boots. His hands, clasped in front of him, were scarred and calloused, but it was his face that caught her. Not handsome, exactly. Too rough for that. His jaw was strong, shadowed with stubble. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against tanned skin, and his eyes, gray, like storm clouds, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression she couldn't read. Not hunger, not satisfaction, just observation. Like he was trying to figure her out too. The walk felt endless. Each step echoed in the quiet church. Alara kept her chin up, her spine straight. If she was going to be sold, she'd at least do it with dignity. When she reached the altar, Rowan didn't smile, didn't reach for her hand. He just gave a small nod, acknowledging her presence, and turned to face the preacher. The ceremony was brief, mechanical. The preacher spoke the words he'd probably spoken 100 times, his voice bored and hurried. Alara heard none of it. Her mind was somewhere else, back on the farm before her parents died, when life had been simple, when Thomas had been a brother, not a coward. "Do you, Alara Marie Voss, take this man?" She heard that part. Her throat tightened. This was it, the moment where she could still say no, could walk out, face whatever consequences came. But where would she go? "I do." The words tasted like ash. Rowan's turn. He didn't hesitate. "I do." His voice was low, rough. A rancher's voice worn down by wind and silence. "Then by the power vested in me." The preacher droned on. Alara felt dizzy. The walls of the church seemed to close in, the air too thick to breathe. This was real. This was happening. In a few seconds, she would be bound to a man she didn't know, in a life she didn't choose, and there was nothing. "You may kiss the bride." Rowan turned to her. For a moment, their eyes met. And in that brief second, Alara saw something unexpected. Hesitation. He didn't want this either. The realization hit her like cold water. This wasn't just her nightmare, it was his too. Whatever arrangement he'd made with Thomas, whatever reasons he had for needing a wife, he looked just as trapped as she felt. Rowan leaned in. She braced herself, but the kiss never came. Instead, he pressed his lips briefly to her forehead, a gesture so unexpected, so strangely gentle, that Alara forgot to breathe. When he pulled back, his eyes found hers again. "I'll give you a reason to smile," he said quietly. Only she could hear it. "I promise." Then he stepped back, and the moment broke. The preacher clapped his hands together. "Well then, congratulations." A smattering of polite applause from the pews. Alara felt numb. Rowan offered his arm. She took it because she didn't know what else to do. They walked back down the aisle together, strangers bound by law and desperation. Outside, the afternoon sun was brutal. Alara squinted against the glare, her head pounding. A wagon waited in the street. Rowan's, she assumed. Rough-built, practical. 2 horses hitched to the front, their tails flicking at flies. Thomas appeared at her elbow, his expression somewhere between relief and guilt. "Well," he said awkwardly, "I suppose this is it." Alara looked at him. Her brother. The person who was supposed to protect her. "Yes," she said flatly. "I suppose it is." He flinched, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, an apology maybe, or some useless justification, but Rowan cut him off. "We should go. Long ride ahead." Thomas nodded quickly, grateful for the escape. He stepped back. Didn't even try to hug her. Rowan helped Alara into the wagon. His hand was steady, impersonal. Once she was seated, he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Wait." Thomas stepped forward, pulling an envelope from his coat. "Her things, what she has left." Rowan took it without comment and tucked it into his jacket. Then, with a snap of the reins, they were moving. Alara didn't look back. The town disappeared behind them quickly. 1 minute, there were buildings and people and noise. The next, just open land stretching endlessly in every direction. Hills rolled into mountains in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the summer heat. The sky was impossibly big, blue and cloudless, pressing down like a weight. Rowan didn't speak. He guided the horses with practiced ease, his focus on the rutted dirt road ahead. Alara sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, the wilted bouquet crushed between her fingers. She should say something, ask something. Where are we going? How far? What happens when we get there? But the words wouldn't come. An hour passed, then 2. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. The only sounds were the creak of the wagon, the clop of hooves, the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Finally, Rowan spoke. "There's water in the canteen, behind the seat." Alara glanced at him, startled. His eyes stayed on the road. "Thank you," she said quietly. She reached back and found the canteen, dented metal, warm from the sun. The water inside tasted stale but clean. She drank sparingly, aware that she didn't know when they'd find more. When she offered it to Rowan, he shook his head. "Keep it." More silence. Alara studied the landscape. The land here was beautiful in a brutal way. Wild grasses bending under the wind, clusters of sage and juniper clinging to rocky soil. Everything looked sun-bleached, faded, like the color had been burned out of the world. "How much farther?" she asked eventually. "Another 3 hours, maybe 4. Her heart sank. Hours. She'd be stuck in this wagon, beside this stranger, for hours more. Is it always this quiet? Rowan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Out here? Yes. Do you live alone? I did. The past tense hung between them. Alara looked down at her hands. The wedding ring Rowan had slipped onto her finger during the ceremony caught the light. Plain gold, no adornment. It felt foreign, heavy. Why did you need a wife? The question came out before she could stop it. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. She thought he might not answer. Land office requires it, he said finally, for homestead claims. Married men get priority, more acreage. So this is about land. Isn't everything? He wasn't wrong. Out here, land was survival. Without it, you were nothing. Alara understood that better than most. And the money you paid Thomas? A debt's a debt. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Your brother made a deal. I honored it. That's the end of it. Alara bit her lip. She wanted to argue, to push back. But what was the point? It was done. She was married to this man, bound to his land, his life. Fighting about the reasons wouldn't change anything. What do you expect from me? She asked instead. Rowan glanced at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd left town. I expect you to survive, he said simply. It wasn't the answer she'd expected. No demands, no list of duties, just survival. That's it? That's enough. The wagon hit a rut, jostling them both. Alara grabbed the edge of the seat to steady herself. Rowan's hand shot out instinctively, steadying her shoulder before pulling back just as quickly. Sorry, he muttered. Road's rough. It's fine. Another hour crawled by. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The temperature dropped, the heat of the day fading into something cooler. Alara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. You cold? She shook her head. I'm fine. There's a blanket in the back, if you need it. I said I'm fine. Rowan nodded and said nothing more. By the time the homestead came into view, the sun was a red disk sinking below the horizon. Alara saw it from a distance, a small cabin nestled at the base of a hill, smoke rising from the chimney. A barn stood nearby, weathered and leaning slightly. A corral held a few horses. Beyond that, nothing but open land. It looked lonely. Rowan guided the wagon up the final stretch of road. As they drew closer, Alara could make out more details. The cabin was rough-built, logs chinked with mud and moss. A single window faced the road, covered with oiled paper instead of glass. The door was solid wood, scarred and patched. It wasn't much, but it was clearly built by someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who cared about making things last. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop and set the brake. He climbed down, then offered Alara his hand. She took it. His grip was strong, steadying her as she stepped down onto the hard-packed dirt. This is it, Rowan said, gesturing toward the cabin. Home. Alara looked at the structure. Her new home. The place she'd spend the rest of her life. It felt like a prison. Come on, Rowan said, already moving toward the door. I'll show you inside. The cabin was dim, lit only by the fading daylight through the window and the glow of the fire in the hearth. It was one large room, a bed in the corner, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies, a trunk pushed against the wall. Everything was orderly, clean, sparse. Not much, Rowan admitted, setting down the bag he'd carried in. But it's solid, keeps the cold out. Alara stepped inside slowly, taking it all in. The air smelled like wood smoke and leather. A pot hung over the fire, something inside bubbling quietly. That's stew, Rowan said, following her gaze. Left it on this morning. Should be ready. She nodded mutely. Rowan moved past her, opening the trunk and pulling out a folded blanket. You can have the bed. I'll sleep out in the barn. Alara turned sharply. What? The bed. It's yours. This is your home. It's our home now. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You're my wife. You get the bed. I didn't ask for... I know. He met her eyes. But I'm giving it anyway. No arguments. Elara stared at him, searching for some hidden motive, some expectation lurking beneath the surface. But there was nothing, just that same steady, unreadable expression. "Why?" she asked quietly.
Bruce.
"Because you're tired. Because today was hard. Because you deserve at least that much." He turned away before she could respond, ladling stew into 2 bowls and setting them on the table. "Eat," he said. "Then get some rest. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Elara sat down slowly. The stew was simple: venison, potatoes, carrots, but it was hot and filling. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind still spinning. Rowan ate in silence across from her. When he finished, he stood and cleared the bowls, setting them aside to wash later. "There's a stream about 50 yards south if you need water in the morning," he said, pulling on his coat. "Privy's behind the cabin. If you need anything, I'll be fine." He nodded, hesitated at the door. "Elara?" It was the first time he'd said her name. She looked up. "I meant what I said. In the church." His gray eyes held hers. "I'll give you a reason to smile, even if it takes years." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Elara sat alone in the flickering firelight, her hands wrapped around the cooling bowl. And for the first time since Thomas had told her what he'd done, she let herself cry. Not loud, not desperate. Just quiet, exhausted tears that slipped down her cheeks and dripped onto the rough wooden table. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the brother who'd betrayed her, for the future she'd never have. And when the tears finally stopped, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, stood up, and walked to the bed. It was narrow. The mattress was straw, covered with a worn quilt, but it was clean. Elara lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up, the lonely call of a coyote in the distance. This was her life now. "Survive," Rowan had said. Elara closed her eyes. She would. The first week passed in a fog of avoidance and routine. Elara woke each morning to an empty cabin, the fire already stoked, fresh water in the basin by the door. Rowan was always gone by the time she opened her eyes, out with the horses or mending fence or doing whatever it was ranchers did before sunrise. She'd find bread on the table, sometimes jerky, once a handful of early berries in a tin cup. He never left a note, never explained, just provided, then disappeared. She told herself she preferred it this way. The days stretched long and silent. Elara cleaned the cabin, though it didn't need cleaning, organized shelves that were already organized, washed clothes that weren't particularly dirty, anything to fill the hours. The work was mindless, but it kept her hands busy and her thoughts from spiraling into the dark places they wanted to go. Rowan returned in the evenings, always at dusk. He'd nod at her, wash up at the basin outside, then sit at the table while she served whatever simple meal she'd managed to scrape together. They ate in silence. When they finished, he'd bank the fire, check the door, and leave for the barn without a word. Every single night. On the 8th day, Elara woke to rain. It drummed against the cabin roof in a steady rhythm, seeping through cracks she hadn't noticed before. She got up and moved the wash basin to catch the worst of the drips, then stood at the window watching water turn the hard dirt outside into thick mud. The landscape looked different in the rain, softer somehow, less brutal. She was still standing there when Rowan came in, soaked through and tracking mud across the floor she'd scrubbed the day before. "Storm's settling in," he said, shaking water from his hat. "Could last a few days." Elara watched mud spread across the clean planks. Something in her chest tightened. "You're dripping everywhere." He looked down, then back at her. "I'll clean it." "I just washed that floor." "I know. I'm sorry." The apology should have helped. Instead, it made everything worse. She didn't want his apologies, didn't want his careful distance or his quiet considerateness, or the way he treated her like something fragile that might shatter if he got too close. Just, she stopped herself, took a breath. "Take off your boots next time." Rowan nodded slowly. "All right." He started to leave, then paused at the door. "There's a leak, above the bed." "I know, I moved the basin. I'll patch it when the rain stops." "Fine." He lingered another moment like he wanted to say something else, but whatever it was, he swallowed it down and left. Elara listened to his footsteps fade across the muddy yard. Then she grabbed a rag and started mopping up the mess he'd made, scrubbing harder than necessary, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. The rain continued for 3 days straight. By the second day, the cabin felt like a cage. Alara had reorganized everything twice, mended clothes that didn't need mending, and scrubbed surfaces until her hands were raw. The walls pressed in. The silence became oppressive. She found herself standing at the window for hours, watching rain turn the world gray and formless. Rowan stayed in the barn mostly, only coming in for meals. The few times they occupied the cabin together, the air felt thick with unspoken words. He'd sit at the table working on some piece of tack, leather, and tools spread out in front of him, while she pretended to read a water-stained book she'd found on the shelf. Neither of them spoke. On the third evening, something broke. Alara was cooking beans and salt pork, the same thing they'd eaten for the past week because that's what there was. She stirred the pot mechanically, watching steam rise and dissipate. Behind her, Rowan sat at the table, stitching a bridle that had come apart. The silence stretched, pressed down, suffocated. "Do you ever talk?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Rowan's hands stilled. "What? Talk. Have a conversation. Say anything that isn't about water or weather or fixing things." He set down the bridle slowly. "I talk when there's something to say." "There's always something to say." "Is there?" Alara spun around to face him. "I've been here over a week and I know nothing about you. Where you're from, how you ended up here, why you needed a wife badly enough to pay off a stranger's debt. Does it matter?" "Yes!" The word burst out of her. "Yes, it matters. I'm stuck here, married to you, living in your cabin, eating your food, wearing this—" She held up her hand, the gold band catching the firelight. "And I don't even know who you are." Rowan's expression didn't change. That same steady, unreadable mask. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," she thought. "Nothing. Something that makes this feel less like prison." "Why Montana?" she asked finally. "Why here?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face like he was trying to decide how much truth to give. "Wyoming first," he said eventually. "Worked cattle drives for a few years, saved what I could. Montana had land available. Homestead Act meant I could claim it if I worked it, so I did." "Just like that? You just decided to build a life in the middle of nowhere?" "Everywhere's the middle of nowhere out here." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Alara turned back to the pot, frustration coiling in her stomach. It was like trying to get blood from stone. Every response careful, measured, revealing nothing real. "What about family?" she pressed. "Parents? Siblings?" "Dead." The word landed flat and final. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." She wanted to push further, to crack through whatever wall he'd built around himself. But the set of his shoulders told her she'd hit a boundary he wouldn't cross. "The beans are ready," she said instead. They ate in silence again. But this time it felt different, less comfortable. More like two people actively choosing not to speak, rather than simply having nothing to say. When Rowan finished, he stood and carried his bowl to the basin. "I'll be in the barn." "Of course you will." He stopped, turned. "You want me to stay?" Yes, she thought. No, I don't know what I want. "Do what you want," she said. "You always do anyway." Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or frustration. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Good night, Alara." The door closed behind him. Alara sat alone at the table, staring at the half-empty pot of beans, her appetite gone. Rain continued to fall outside, endless and gray. The storm finally broke on the fourth morning. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through the window, the world washed clean and startlingly bright. The air smelled different, fresh, alive, like the earth itself had taken a breath. She got dressed and stepped outside. The yard was a mess of puddles and mud, but beyond it the land stretched green and glittering. Wildflowers she hadn't noticed before dotted the hillside, yellow and purple and white. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at. For the first time since arriving, Alara felt something other than numbness. Not happiness exactly, but not despair either. Maybe something like possibility. She was standing there, boots sinking into soft mud, when she heard voices. Men's voices. Coming from beyond the barn. Alara walked toward the sound, curious. As she rounded the corner, she saw Rowan talking with two other men, both rough-looking, dressed in worn range clothes. One was older, gray-haired and thick around the middle. The other was younger, lean and weathered, with a rifle slung across his back. They all turned when they heard her approach. "Ma'am," the older man said, tipping his hat. Rowan's eyes met hers briefly before he gestured toward the men. "This is Frank Tillman and his son Daniel. They run cattle on the next property over. 15 miles east," Frank added with a grin, "which makes us practically neighbors out here." Alara managed a small nod. "Nice to meet you." "Heard Rowan got himself hitched," Daniel said, looking her over with open curiosity. "Didn't quite believe it till now." "Daniel," Frank said sharply. "What? I'm just saying—" "He's saying I didn't seem the marrying type," Rowan cut in, his tone neutral. "He's not wrong." Frank cleared his throat awkwardly. "We were just telling Rowan about the situation up north. Found some tracks near Beaver Creek. Wolf pack, looks like. Big one. Been taking calves," Daniel added. "Lost 3 last week alone." Rowan's expression hardened. "How many in the pack?" "Hard to say. At least 5. Maybe more." "We're organizing a hunt," Frank said. "Day after tomorrow. Could use another gun if you're willing." Rowan nodded slowly. "I'll be there." "Good man." Frank clapped him on the shoulder, then turned to Alara. "Pleasure meeting you, ma'am. You need anything? Our place is due east. Just follow the creek." "Thank you." The Tillmans mounted their horses and rode off, leaving Alara and Rowan standing in the muddy yard. "Wolfpack?" she asked. "Happens sometimes. They come down from the mountains when game gets scarce, go after livestock. Is it dangerous?" "Can be." She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. "So you're just going to ride out and hunt wolves?" "That's what needs doing." Alara felt something twist in her chest, not quite fear, more like the realization that this was her life now, waiting while her husband rode out into danger, not knowing if he'd come back. "What if something happens to you?" Rowan looked at her surprised. "I'll be careful." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "If something happens, Frank knows the situation. He'll make sure you're looked after." "I don't want to be looked after. I want—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. "What?" "Nothing. Never mind." But Rowan didn't move. He stood there studying her with those storm-gray eyes, and for once she couldn't read his expression at all. "I'll come back," he said finally. Quiet, almost gentle. "You can't promise that." "No, but I can try." It wasn't enough, but it was all she had. The day of the hunt, Rowan left before dawn. Alara watched from the window as he saddled his horse, checked his rifle, and rode off into the pre-dawn darkness. The emptiness he left behind felt heavier than usual. She spent the day trying to stay busy, hauled water from the stream, weeded the small vegetable patch behind the cabin that she'd only just discovered, made bread that came out dense and flat because she couldn't focus long enough to get the measurements right. By evening, her nerves were frayed. She kept glancing toward the horizon, looking for riders, listening for gunshots, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. Night fell. No sign of Rowan. Alara lit the lamp and sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The cabin felt enormous and empty. Every creak of the walls made her jump. She told herself she was being ridiculous. He was fine. This was just what ranch life was like. Men rode out, handled problems, came back when it was done. But the fear sat heavy in her stomach anyway. It was nearly midnight when she finally heard hoofbeats. Alara rushed to the door, throwing it open. Rowan was dismounting in the yard, moving stiffly. Even in the dim light from the cabin, she could see blood on his sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. You're bleeding." "Just a scrape." He started toward the barn, leading his horse. Alara followed. "Rowan, I need to unsaddle him first." "I don't care about the horse." He stopped, turned to look at her. In the moonlight, she could see how exhausted he was. Dirt streaked across his face, his clothes torn and filthy. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark with something she couldn't name. "Did you kill them?" she asked quietly. "4 of them. 1 got away." "And the blood?" "One of them got close, caught me with its claws before I could shoot." He flexed his arm, wincing. "I'll clean it up." "Come inside, I'll do it." "Alara," I said, "I'll do it." Her voice came out harder than she'd intended. You can't reach it properly yourself. Don't argue. For once, he didn't. Inside the cabin, Rowan sat heavily at the table while Ilara heated water and gathered the medical supplies she'd found stored in the trunk. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, but she forced them steady. Take off your shirt. He hesitated, then complied. The wound ran along his upper arm, 3 deep scratches, still seeping blood. They looked painful. Ilara cleaned the gashes carefully, trying not to notice the scars that covered his torso. Old wounds, long healed, evidence of a hard life she knew nothing about. This might hurt, she warned before pressing a cloth soaked in whiskey against the cuts. Rowan hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. Sorry. It's fine. Needs doing. She worked in silence, cleaning and bandaging the wound with hands that grew steadier as she focused. When she finished, she stepped back. Done? Keep it clean. Change the bandage tomorrow. Thank you. He started to stand, but Ilara put a hand on his shoulder. Wait. There's stew. You should eat. I'm all right. You've been out since before dawn. You're not all right. She ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of him before he could argue. Rowan stared at it for a moment, then picked up the spoon. Ilara sat across from him, watching him eat. He looked hollow, used up. Was it bad? She asked quietly. Bad enough? The one that got away, will it come back? Maybe. Wolves are smart, might decide easier prey elsewhere. He paused. We'll keep watch. Set traps if we need to. We? He looked up at her. This is your home too now. Your land. Your livestock. That makes it your problem as much as mine. The words shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow they did. I don't know anything about traps, she admitted. I'll teach you. It was the first time he'd offered to share something, to include her in the work rather than just providing for her. All right, Ilara said. Rowan finished eating and stood, moving toward the door. Rowan. He paused, hand on the latch. I'm glad you came back. The words hung between them. Raw. More honest than anything she'd said since arriving. He didn't turn around, but she saw his shoulders shift, some tension releasing. Me too, he said quietly. Then he was gone, back to the barn like always. But something had shifted, something small but important. Ilara cleaned up the dishes and banked the fire. When she lay down that night, she didn't cry, didn't feel that crushing weight of hopelessness. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Rowan still slept in the barn, still kept his distance. But he started talking more. Not a lot. He'd never be chatty, but enough. He'd explain what he was working on when she asked, point out landmarks when they were outside, answer questions instead of deflecting them. And Ilara found herself asking more. About the land, the livestock, how things worked out here. She was tired of feeling useless, tired of being a burden. Show me how to milk the cow, she said one morning. Rowan looked up from the harness he was mending. You want to learn? Unless you want to do it every morning forever. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fair point. He taught her in the small barn, patient and methodical. Showed her where to sit, how to grip, the rhythm of pulling. The cow, an old brown creature named Bessie, tolerated Ilara's clumsy attempts with bovine indifference. Gentle but firm, Rowan instructed. She'll let you know if you're doing it wrong. Bessie did indeed let her know, shifting irritably when Ilara's grip faltered. Easy, Rowan said, his hand covering hers briefly to demonstrate. Like this. The contact was brief, impersonal, but it was the first time he'd touched her since their wedding day. Ilara's breath caught. Rowan pulled away quickly, like he'd realized what he'd done. Try again, he said, his voice carefully neutral. She did. This time, milk actually came out. There, Rowan said. You've got it. Pride flickered in his eyes, small but genuine. Ilara felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. Accomplishment. Maybe even the edge of belonging. Over the following weeks, she learned other things. How to collect eggs without getting pecked. How to tell when a horse was favoring a leg. How to read the sky for weather changes. Rowan taught her with quiet patience, never making her feel stupid for not knowing things that were second nature to him. And slowly, carefully. The distance between them began to shrink. Not dramatically. They weren't friends, certainly not anything more. But they were becoming something. Partners, maybe. In survival, if nothing else. Then, on a cool morning in early autumn, everything changed. Elora was gathering kindling near the tree line when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Faint. Weak. Almost like crying. She froze, listening. There it was again. Coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. Every instinct told her to go back to the cabin, get Rowan. Don't investigate alone. But the sound came again, desperate and small, and her feet were moving before she'd made a conscious decision. She found them about 30 yards into the trees. 2 children, huddled together in the hollow of a fallen log. A girl and a younger boy, maybe 8 and 5 years old, respectively. Their clothes were filthy and torn, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. The girl had her arms wrapped around the boy, who was shaking violently despite the mild temperature. They looked half dead. Elora's heart stopped. Oh my! She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside them. What happened? Where are your parents? The girl stared at her with huge, terrified eyes. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The boy just kept shaking. It's all right, Elora said, forcing her voice steady even as panic clawed at her throat. You're safe now. I'm going to help you. She reached for the boy first. He was smaller, clearly in worse shape. His skin was burning with fever. Can you walk? She asked the girl. The girl nodded shakily. Good. We need to get you both back to the cabin. It's not far. Can you make it? Another nod. Elora scooped up the boy. He weighed almost nothing, just bones and ragged breaths, and stood. Stay close to me. The walk back to the cabin felt endless. The boy's fever burned through his clothes against her chest. The girl stumbled along behind, barely keeping her feet under her. Rowan! Elora shouted as soon as the cabin came into view. Rowan! He appeared from the barn, concern flashing across his face when he saw her. Then he saw what she was carrying, and his expression went flat with shock. Where did you— The woods. We need water, blankets, food if they can eat it. Rowan was already moving, heading inside. By the time Elora got there with both children, he had the fire built up and blankets spread out. She laid the boy down carefully. He was barely conscious now, his breathing shallow and rapid. Fever, Rowan said, touching the child's forehead. His jaw tightened. Bad one. What do we do? Cool him down, get fluids in him if he can swallow. He looked at the girl, who stood trembling near the door. Are you hurt? The girl shook her head mutely. Hungry? A tiny nod. Rowan moved to the shelves, pulling down bread and cheese. He handed them to the girl, who grabbed them with shaking hands and started eating like she hadn't seen food in days. She probably hadn't. What's your name? Elora asked gently. The girl swallowed hard. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Lena. And your brother? Jace. Where are your parents, Lena? The girl's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, unable or unwilling to answer. Elora looked at Rowan. He met her gaze, and in that moment, they shared the same thought. These children were alone. It's all right, Elora said, pulling Lena into a gentle embrace. The girl stiffened at first, then collapsed against her, silent sobs racking her small frame. You're safe now, both of you. I promise. Over the girl's head, Rowan's eyes met hers again. We can't keep them, he said quietly. There's an orphanage in Helena. They'll be looked after properly. That's a week's ride. I know. And what if they don't make it that long? Look at him. She gestured to Jace, whose lips were starting to turn blue. He needs help now. We're not equipped. I don't care. The words came out fierce, surprising them both. We found them. They're here. We helped them. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly and nodded. All right. We helped them. And just like that, their fragile new equilibrium shattered. But for the first time since arriving at this isolated homestead, Elora felt something stir inside her that she'd thought was dead. Purpose. The first night was the worst. Jace's fever spiked just after midnight, his small body convulsing with chills despite the pile of blankets Elora had wrapped around him. She sat on the floor beside the bed, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, watching his face twist with fever dreams she couldn't reach. Rowan had rigged a makeshift cot for Lena near the fire, and the girl lay there curled into a tight ball, eyes wide open, watching everything. She hadn't spoken again since giving her name, just ate what they offered and retreated into silence. His breathing's getting worse, Alara said, not bothering to hide the fear in her voice. Rowan crouched beside her, listening to the rattling wheeze coming from Jace's chest. His jaw tightened. Pneumonia, maybe. Or something close to it. What do we do? Keep him warm. Get fluids in him when he's conscious enough to swallow. Steam might help the breathing. He stood, moving toward the pot hanging over the fire. I'll heat water. Put some pine needles in it. The vapor should ease his lungs some. Alara watched him work, this man who'd claimed not to know how to care for children. But his hands were steady, his movements certain, like he'd done this before. How do you know all this? She asked. Rowan didn't look up. You live out here long enough. You learn. No doctors to run to when things go wrong. The water boiled. He added a handful of crushed pine needles, and soon the cabin filled with sharp, clean-smelling steam. Jace's breathing eased slightly, the terrible wheezing quieting to something less desperate. Better, Rowan said, but he's not out of it yet. Will he make it? The question hung between them. Rowan looked at the boy, this scrap of a child who'd appeared out of nowhere, fighting for every breath. I don't know, he said honestly, but we'll do everything we can. They worked in shifts through the night. Rowan kept the steam going while Alara tried to get small sips of water past Jace's cracked lips. Lena watched from her cot, silent as a ghost. By dawn, Jace's fever had dropped slightly. Not much, but enough that his breathing steadied and his eyes flickered open once or twice. Alara sagged with relief. Get some sleep, Rowan said, touching her shoulder briefly. I'll watch him. I'm fine. You've been up all night. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Sleep. That's not a request. She was too exhausted to argue. Alara moved to the cot Rowan usually slept on, the one he'd given up for Lena, and lay down fully clothed. Within seconds, darkness pulled her under. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the window and voices drifted from somewhere nearby. Low, careful voices. Alara sat up, disoriented. Rowan sat at the table with Lena, showing her something. It took a moment for Alara's sleep-fogged brain to register what it was. A carved wooden horse. Small, simple, but clearly made with care. My pa used to make things like this, Lena was saying, her voice still barely above a whisper. Before... She stopped, swallowed hard. Rowan didn't push. He just nodded and turned the carving over in his hands. This one's not finished yet. Was going to add a saddle, maybe. What do you think? Lena studied it seriously. A saddle would be good. And a bridle. A bridle, right. Rowan pulled out his knife and a fresh piece of wood. Want to help? The girl's eyes widened. Me? Why not? I'll do the cutting, but you can tell me what shape it should be. Something flickered across Lena's face. Surprise. Maybe hope. She nodded, and together they bent over the wood, Rowan's scarred hands guiding the blade while Lena watched with fierce concentration. Alara stayed quiet, not wanting to break the moment. This was the most animated she'd seen the girl since finding her. And Rowan, usually so closed off, so guarded, looked almost at ease. After a few minutes, Lena glanced up and saw Alara watching. She stiffened immediately, the fragile openness shuddering closed. Morning, Alara said softly, standing and moving toward the bed where Jace still slept. How is he? Fever's down more, Rowan said. Got some broth in him about an hour ago. Kept it down. Relief flooded through her. That's good. That's really good. She checked Jace herself, touching his forehead. Still warm, but nothing like the terrifying heat of the night before. His breathing was easier too, less labored. Hey there, she murmured when his eyes cracked open. How are you feeling? The boy stared at her with confusion and fear. His lips moved, forming a word she couldn't hear. What is it, sweetheart? Lena, he whispered. Want Lena. I'm right here, Jace. Lena was off the chair in an instant, kneeling beside the bed and taking her brother's hand. I'm right here. You're okay. Jace's eyes found his sister, and some of the tension left his small body. Tired. Then sleep. I'll stay with you. He closed his eyes again, but his hand stayed locked around Lena's. Alara moved away to give them space. Rowan had already returned to his carving, pretending not to watch the children, while clearly watching them. "We need supplies," he said quietly. "Food, medicine if I can get it, maybe some clothes that actually fit them. The nearest town. 2 days' ride. I'll leave this afternoon, be back by week's end." Panic flared in Alara's chest. "You're leaving me alone with them? You'll be fine." "Rowan, I don't... What if Jace gets worse? What if something happens and I can't..." "You'll manage." He looked at her steadily. "You got them this far. You'll keep them going." "That's not the same as knowing what to do." "Sure it is." He stood gathering the carving supplies. "Most of living is just figuring it out as you go. You're already doing that." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they terrified her. But Rowan was right. They needed supplies, and someone had to stay with the children. "Fine," she said. "But if anything goes wrong, it won't. And if it does, you'll handle it." He paused at the door. "You're stronger than you think, Alara." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the middle of the cabin with 2 broken children and no idea what she was doing. The first day alone passed in a blur of small crises. Jace's fever spiked again mid-morning, sending Alara into a near panic before she remembered the steam. She boiled water with pine needles like Rowan had done, holding the pot close to the bed until Jace's breathing eased. Lena helped without being asked, fetching water and keeping the fire going, but she still wouldn't talk beyond the bare minimum. Alara tried asking gentle questions. Where had they come from? What had happened to their parents? But the girl just shook her head and went silent. By evening, Alara was exhausted and frustrated. She'd managed to keep both children alive, but barely. Every sound made her jump. Every change in Jace's breathing sent her heart racing. She was cleaning up from a meager dinner when Lena finally spoke. "Why are you helping us?" Alara turned, surprised. The girl stood by the fire, arms wrapped around herself, her expression guarded but curious. "Because you needed help," Alara said simply. "But you don't know us." "Does that matter?" Lena's brow furrowed. "Most people wouldn't. Most people would have just left us." The words carried a weight that made Alara's chest ache. What had these children been through? "Well, I'm not most people," she said, "and neither is Rowan." "The man. Your husband." "Yes. He seems okay." Lena said it carefully, like she was testing the words. "He didn't yell or nothing, even when Jace knocked over the water." Alara thought about that, about Rowan's quiet patience with the children, the way he'd shown Lena the carving without making a big deal of it, how he'd trusted Alara to handle things while he was gone. "He's a good man," she said, and realized she meant it. Lena nodded slowly, then, so quietly, Alara almost missed it. "Our pa wasn't." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Alara wanted to ask more, to understand. But the shuttered look was back on Lena's face, and she knew pushing would only drive the girl further away. "You're safe here," she said instead. "Both of you. I promise." Lena didn't respond, but later when Alara checked on them before bed, she found Lena curled up next to Jace, one hand still gripping his, and something in the girl's posture had softened. Maybe she was starting to believe it. The second day was easier. Jace woke with more color in his cheeks and actually asked for food. Alara made him thin porridge, and he ate half of it before falling back asleep. Progress. Lena emerged from her shell slightly, asking questions about the cabin, the animals, the land around them. Alara answered what she could, surprised by how much she'd learned in the few months she'd been here. "Do you like it?" Lena asked suddenly. "Living out here?" Alara paused, considering. A month ago, she would have said no without hesitation. This place had felt like exile, punishment. But now? "I'm getting used to it," she admitted. "It's hard, lonely sometimes, but there's a kind of freedom to it too. No one telling you who to be or what to do." Lena absorbed this quietly. "Our ma used to say the frontier was where people went to disappear." "Is that what you were doing? Disappearing?" The girl's face closed off. "We should check on Jace." Subject change. Alara let it go. By the third day, routine had established itself. Alara found herself talking to the children more naturally, explaining what she was doing as she worked. Lena started helping with small tasks, gathering eggs, sweeping the floor. Even Jace, still weak, would watch from the bed with curious eyes. The cabin felt different, fuller somehow. Less like a prison and more like— she didn't want to say it, didn't want to jinx whatever fragile thing was building, but it almost felt like a home. Rowan returned on the 5th day, just after dawn. Alara was outside drawing water when she heard hoofbeats. Relief flooded through her so suddenly she nearly dropped the bucket. He looked exhausted, dusty from the road, but his eyes went straight to her. "Everything all right?" "Fine. Good, actually. Jace is much better. Lena's been helping." Something eased in his expression. "Good." He dismounted and started unloading supplies from the saddlebags: food, fabric, a small bottle of medicine. And tucked among it all, more carved animals. A deer, a rabbit, a bird, and— "You made these?" Alara asked, picking up the deer. "Had some downtime at the inn. Figured the boy might like them." Her throat tightened. This hard, quiet man had spent his evenings carving toys for a child he barely knew. "He will," she said. "They both will." Inside, Lena's face lit up when she saw the carvings, actual joy breaking through her usual wariness. Jace reached for them with weak but eager hands, arranging them carefully on the blanket beside him. "Thank you," Lena whispered to Rowan. He nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Just some wood." "It's not just wood," Alara said firmly. "It's kind. Say you're welcome." Rowan shifted, then mumbled, "You're welcome." Over the next week, the children grew stronger. Jace's fever disappeared entirely, and though he was still too thin and tired easily, he started sitting up, playing with the carved animals, even laughing at things Lena said. Lena herself slowly opened up, not all at once, but in fits and starts. A comment here, a story there. Alara learned their mother had died 2 years ago. Their father had been— the girl's words were vague, but the implications clear— not a good man. He'd brought them west promising a better life, then abandoned them when things got hard. They'd been alone for weeks before Alara found them, surviving on whatever they could scavenge, hiding in the woods, terrified and starving. "We thought we were going to die," Lena admitted one evening. She and Alara were washing dishes while Rowan showed Jace how to whittle. "I tried to keep Jace going, but I didn't know what to do, and then you found us." "I'm glad I did," Alara said truthfully. "Are you going to send us away to an orphanage or something?" The question caught Alara off guard. She looked across the cabin to where Rowan sat with Jace, his large hands guiding the boy's small ones, patient and careful. They should send them away. That had been the plan. Get them healthy, then find them a proper home. But the thought of putting these children back out into the world, into an institution where they'd be numbers, not names, made something in her chest rebel. "I don't know," she said honestly. "That's not just my decision. But if it was—" Alara met the girl's eyes, saw hope there, fragile and desperate. "If it was, I'd let you stay." Lena's breath caught. "Really?" "Really." But it wasn't just her decision. And she had no idea how Rowan would feel about keeping 2 children they'd found in the woods. That night, after the children were asleep, Alara broached the subject. "We need to talk about them." Rowan looked up from the harness he was mending. "Figured we would eventually." Lena asked if we're sending them away. "What did you tell her?" "That it's not just my choice." Alara took a breath. "Rowan, I know this wasn't part of the plan. I know we barely know each other, and adding 2 children to this, whatever this is, seems impossible. But I can't send them back out there. I can't." He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You want to keep them?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said. "I do." "Alara, we can barely manage ourselves. 2 more mouths to feed, 2 more lives to be responsible for. I know the arguments. I've made them all to myself 100 times. She moved closer, needing him to understand. "But they've got no one. And we've got room, we've got food, we've got—" "What? A marriage that's not really a marriage? A homestead held together by luck and stubbornness? We've got a chance to do something good," she said fiercely. "To give them something better than what they had. Isn't that worth something?" Rowan stood pacing to the window. His shoulders were tight with tension. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." He was silent for a long time, When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I had a family once, brother, younger than me. I was supposed to look after him. He stopped, his jaw working. I didn't. He died because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't fast enough. I swore I'd never. He broke off, shaking his head. Elara's heart cracked open. She'd wondered about his scars, his silences. Now she understood. That wasn't your fault, she said softly. You don't know that. I know you. The words surprised them both. I know you're careful, patient, good with them. Whatever happened before, you're not that person anymore. People don't change, Elara. Yes, they do. She stood, moving to his side. I've changed since coming here. Since... She gestured around the cabin, unable to articulate everything she meant. This isn't who I was supposed to be either, but here we are. Rowan turned to look at her, really look at her, and for once his guard was down. She could see the fear there and the longing, the war between what he wanted and what he thought he deserved. If we do this, he said slowly, if we keep them, it changes everything. I know. We'd have to make this real, not just a piece of paper, an actual family. Her breath caught. I know. And if I fail again, if something happens to them because I'm not enough. Elara reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred, trembling slightly. Then we'll fail together, she said. But we won't, because we're not alone anymore. Rowan stared down at their joined hands. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. All right. All right? They can stay. He looked up, meeting her eyes. We'll figure it out. Somehow. Relief and terror and something else, something that felt dangerously close to joy, flooded through Elara all at once. Thank you, she whispered. He squeezed her hand once, then let go, stepping back to a safer distance. But the wall between them had cracked. Maybe not broken, but definitely cracked. And that was enough. The next morning, Elara told Lena. The girl didn't cry. Didn't throw her arms around Elara or make a scene. She just nodded, her eyes bright, and whispered, Okay. But later, Elara found her in the barn, sitting in the hay with tears streaming silently down her face. Lena? The girl looked up, swiping at her eyes. I'm sorry, You don't have to apologize. I didn't think... Her voice broke. I didn't think anyone would want us. Elara sat down beside her, pulling the girl close. This time, Lena didn't stiffen. She just leaned in, letting herself be held. We want you, Elara said firmly. Both of you. This is your home now, for as long as you need it. What if we mess up? What if we're too much trouble? Then we'll deal with it. That's what families do. Lena pulled back slightly, searching Elara's face. Are we? A family? Elara thought about Rowan teaching Jace to carve, about the four of them eating dinner together, the cabin full of voices for the first time, about how she'd started thinking in terms of we instead of I. Yes, she said. I think we are. The weeks that followed were chaos. Jace recovered fully, which meant he had energy, more energy than seemed possible for someone so small. He was into everything, asking endless questions, making messes faster than Elara could clean them. Lena tried to keep him in line, but she was just a child herself. And slowly she started acting like one, started smiling more, started playing instead of just surviving. The cabin felt too small for 4 people. Rowan started building an addition, a separate room for the children. It was rough work, done in whatever spare time he could find, but he approached it with quiet determination. Elara helped when she could, holding boards while he hammered, learning the feel of construction. They worked side by side, not talking much, but comfortable in the silence. One afternoon, Jace appeared at the worksite, dragging a piece of wood nearly as big as he was. I want to help. Rowan looked at the boy. You sure? It's hard work. I'm strong. A smile tugged at Rowan's mouth. All right then, you can hand me nails, think you can do that? Jace nodded seriously. Elara watched them work together, Rowan explaining each step, Jace listening with fierce concentration. The boy worshipped Rowan, had from almost the first day, followed him everywhere, mimicked his walk, his mannerisms. And Rowan, despite his fears, was gentle with him, patient, careful. A father, Elara thought. He's becoming a father. And she... She was becoming something too. A mother, maybe. Or at least someone these children could count on. It wasn't what she'd planned, wasn't anything like the life she'd imagined. But watching Jace hand Rowan nails with proud precision, watching Lena emerge from the cabin with water for everyone, watching this impossible family take shape, maybe it was better. The letter arrived in late October. Rowan brought it back from a supply run, his face carefully blank as he handed it to Alara. "It's from your brother." Her stomach dropped. She stared at the envelope like it might bite. How did he know where to send it? Must have tracked down the land office records, found the homestead claim. Alara didn't want to open it. Didn't want to know what Thomas had to say after months of silence. But Rowan was watching, and the children were watching, and her hands were already tearing the seal. The letter was short. Thomas's handwriting, always sloppy, was worse than usual. "Alara, I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. But I need help. The debt's paid, but I've got nothing left. Lost the rooms I was renting. Lost my job. I'm sleeping in the livery stable and barely eating. I know I got no right to ask, but you're my sister, my only family. There's opportunity in California. Good work if I can get there. But I need money for passage. Just a loan. I'll pay you back, I swear. Please. Thomas." Alara read it twice, her hands shaking. Part of her wanted to crumple it up, throw it in the fire. Thomas had sold her like livestock, and now he wanted her help? But another part, the part that remembered him before the gambling, before their parents died, when he'd been her protector instead of her betrayer, that part wavered. "What does he want?" Rowan asked quietly. "Money. To get to California." "Are you going to send it?" "I don't know." She looked up at him. "Do we even have money to send?" "Some. Not much, but some." "Would you?" "If it was your family." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "My brother never got the chance to ask for help. I'd give a lot to have that problem." It wasn't an answer, but maybe it was. "He sold me, Rowan, traded me to clear his debts. I know. And now he wants me to save him again. I know that too." Alara looked down at the letter, at Thomas's desperate, messy handwriting. "What do I do?" Rowan moved closer, his hand settling on her shoulder. Warm, steady. "You do whatever you can live with," he said. "But decide for yourself, not for him, not for me, for you." She thought about that, about what she could live with, about the person she'd been when she arrived here, bitter, broken, powerless, and the person she was becoming, someone who'd found children in the woods and refused to let them die, someone who'd learned to milk cows and build rooms and make a life out of nothing, someone who had a choice. "I'm going to write back," she said slowly. "Tell him I'll send what I can, once, but that's it. After that, he's on his own." Rowan nodded. "That seems fair." "Does it?" She laughed bitterly. "Fair would be telling him to go to hell." "Maybe, but you're not doing this for him. You're doing it so you don't carry the weight of wondering what if." He was right. She hated that he was right, but he was. That night she wrote the letter. Kept it short, impersonal. Told Thomas she'd send money for his passage and nothing more. That after this, they were done. She didn't sign it "your sister," just her name. When she sealed the envelope, something in her chest loosened, like she'd set down a burden she'd been carrying for months. Rowan posted it the next time he went to town. He came back with supplies and news. Met Frank Tillman at the general store. He's offering a partnership. Combine our land, pool resources. Says we could run twice the cattle, split the profits. Alara looked up from the stew she was stirring. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." "And?" He sat down at the table, looking tired. "It's a good offer. Smart, even. But it's risk. Everything we've built here, we'd be betting on cattle prices holding, weather cooperating, nothing going wrong. When does anything not go wrong?" A ghost of a smile. "Fair point. Do you want to do it?" Rowan was quiet, thinking. "Part of me does. Part of me thinks we should keep our heads down. Work what we have, not push our luck. And the other part?" He looked at her. "The other part thinks maybe we should stop just surviving, start building something bigger." The words hung between them. Start building something bigger. Alara thought about the children asleep in the next room, about the addition Rowan was constructing, about the garden she wanted to plant in spring, about this life they were cobbling together from scraps and determination. "I think," she said slowly, That we should do it. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You sure? No. But when have we been sure about anything? She sat down across from him. We weren't sure about the children. We did it anyway. This is the same thing. A leap. A risk. A risk that could lose everything. Or gain everything. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I'm tired of being afraid, Rowan. Tired of playing it safe. Maybe it's time to bet on ourselves. He stared at their joined hands, then up at her face. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe hope. All right, he said. We'll do it. And just like that, they chose to stop merely surviving. They chose to build. The partnership with Frank Tillman changed everything, though not in the ways Alara had expected. The first few months were brutal. They combined herds in early spring, which meant twice the cattle, twice the work, and what felt like 10 times the problems. Cows got sick, fences broke in windstorms. A late freeze killed half the early calves. Rowan worked from before dawn until long after dark, his face growing more lined and weathered with each passing week. Alara found herself doing jobs she'd never imagined, helping brand cattle, riding fence lines, even assisting with a difficult birth when one of the heifers got into trouble. Her hands, once soft, grew calloused and scarred. Her back ached constantly. She fell into bed each night too exhausted to think. But the children thrived. Jace followed Rowan everywhere, learning ranch work with the single-minded determination only a 6-year-old could manage. He learned to ride, to rope, to spot a sick animal from across a field. Rowan taught him with endless patience, answering the same questions over and over without complaint. Lena took to helping Alara with the house and garden. The girl had a gift for growing things. The vegetable patch she tended produced more than Alara had thought possible. She was quiet still, but the haunted look had faded from her eyes. I like it here, Lena said one afternoon while they were weeding. She said it casually, like commenting on the weather, but Alara heard the weight behind the words. I'm glad. Do you think... Lena stopped, pulling at a stubborn weed. Do you think we'll always get to stay? Alara's throat tightened. Yes. This is your home, Lena, for as long as you want it. What if you and Rowan change your minds? We won't. How do you know? It was a fair question. How did she know? A year ago, she'd have said nothing was certain, that people always left, always betrayed, always chose themselves first. But watching Rowan teach Jace to mend a saddle, seeing the careful way he made sure both children had enough to eat, even when supplies ran low, remembering how he'd agreed to keep them, despite his fears. Because he's not that kind of man, Alara said. And neither am I. Not anymore. Lena nodded slowly, then went back to weeding. But something in her posture had relaxed. The real test came in June. They'd just finished the spring branding, exhausted but satisfied with the number of healthy calves. The partnership was working. Barely, but working. Then Frank's son Daniel showed up at dawn, his horse lathered and breathing hard. We've got trouble, he said without preamble. Rustlers hit our north pasture last night, took maybe 40 head. Rowan's face went hard. You see who? No, but they left tracks heading west. Pa's getting a group together. We ride in an hour. Alara stepped out of the cabin, dread coiling in her stomach. How long will you be gone? Few days, maybe more. Depends on the trail. Daniel looked apologetic. I know it's bad timing. It's always bad timing, Rowan cut in. He turned to Alara. You'll be all right here? No, she thought. I won't. You're leaving me alone again with 2 children and a homestead I barely know how to run. But she swallowed the panic and nodded. We'll manage. Frank's wife Sarah will check on you. And if anything happens, I know. Fire 3 shots. He studied her face, clearly seen through her forced calm. For a moment, she thought he might stay, might send Daniel off and choose to remain here instead. But 40 head of cattle was money they desperately needed. Money that could mean the difference between making it through winter or losing everything. I'll be back as soon as I can, Rowan said quietly. Then he was saddling his horse, checking his rifle, riding off with Daniel into the pale dawn light. Alara stood in the yard long after they'd disappeared, trying to breathe past the fear. Is Rowan coming back? Jace asked from behind her. She turned. Both children stood on the porch, Lena with her arm around her brother's shoulders. Yes, Alara said firmly. He's coming back. When? A few days. What if something bad happens? Out of the mouths of children, the exact question eating at Alara's insides. Then we'll handle it, she said to him. Come on. Cows need milking and there's a fence by the creek that needs checking. We've got work to do. The first day passed slowly. Alara threw herself into tasks, keeping busy to avoid thinking about what could go wrong. Rustlers didn't usually kill ranchers, but sometimes things got messy. Sometimes people didn't come home. Sarah Tillman rode over in the afternoon, a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Brought some bread and preserves, she said, handing over a basket. Figured you'd have your hands full. Thank you. That's kind. Sarah's eyes swept over the homestead, taking in the additions, the garden, the children playing near the barn. You've done well here. Place looks good. Rowan did most of it. Maybe. But keeping it running while he's out building, that's you. Sarah smiled. How are you holding up? Alara wanted to say fine, wanted to project the competence everyone seemed to expect from her. Instead, she said, I'm terrified. The honesty surprised them both. Sarah nodded slowly. That's normal. First time Frank rode out after Outlaws, I barely slept. Imagined every horrible thing that could happen. Does it get easier? Not really. You just get better at living with it. She squeezed Alara's shoulder. But for what it's worth, Rowan's smart. Careful. He'll come back. You can't know that. No, but I can believe it. Sometimes that's enough. After Sarah left, Alara stood in the quiet cabin and let herself feel the fear. Really feel it instead of pushing it down. She was afraid of being alone again. Afraid of failing the children. Afraid that just when she'd started to build something real, it would all be ripped away. But underneath the fear was something else. Anger. She was angry at rustlers who stole what others worked for. Angry at a world where violence was just part of life. Angry that she'd finally found something worth keeping and now had to spend every minute worrying about losing it. The anger felt better than fear. More useful. Alara straightened her shoulders and went back outside. The fence still needed checking. The animals still needed tending. Life didn't stop just because she was scared, so she wouldn't either. 3 days passed with no word. Alara fell into a routine. Wake before dawn, handle the livestock, work the garden, make meals, keep the children occupied. Every evening, she stood at the edge of the property, scanning the horizon for riders. Nothing. On the fourth night, Lena found her there. You're worried about him. It wasn't a question. Yes, Alara admitted. He'll come back. He has to. Why? Lena looked at her seriously. Because you need him. We all do. The simple certainty in the girl's voice made Alara's chest ache. What if needing someone isn't enough? It has to be. Lena's hand found Alara's. It has to be, or nothing makes sense. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the empty road. Rowan returned on the 5th day, just after noon. Alara was in the garden when Jace came running, shouting. She dropped the hoe and ran to the front of the cabin. 4 riders approached. Rowan, Frank, Daniel, and a man she didn't recognize. They looked exhausted, covered in trail dust, but alive. Relief hit her so hard she had to grab the porch rail to stay upright. Rowan dismounted slowly, favoring his left side. His shirt was torn, and there was a fresh bruise along his jaw, but his eyes found hers immediately. We got them, he said. Got the cattle back too. Most of them. You're hurt. Just bruised. One of them put up a fight. Alara wanted to run to him. Wanted to check every inch of him for injuries, scream at him for scaring her, something. Instead, she said, There's stew on. You all should eat. The men accepted gratefully, filing into the cabin while Alara served food and tried to keep her hands from shaking. Frank told the story between mouthfuls, how they'd tracked the rustlers to a canyon, confronted them, got into a brief shootout before the thieves scattered. They'd recovered 38 head. Not all, but enough. Your husband here tackled one of them right off his horse, Frank said with a grin. Damn near got himself shot doing it, but it worked. Alara's stomach dropped. You what? Rowan shifted uncomfortably. It was necessary. Necessary to get yourself killed? I didn't. You could have. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. The children had gone quiet, watching. Rowan met her eyes, saw the fear there, the anger underneath. Can we talk about this later? He asked quietly. She wanted to say no, wanted to hash it out right then, make him understand what these 5 days had been like, but not in front of everyone. Fine, later. The men finished eating and prepared to leave. Frank clapped Rowan on the shoulder. Partnership's working out good, real good. We'll split the recovered cattle once we've checked them all over. After they left, Jace immediately attached himself to Rowan, peppering him with questions about the chase, the fight, everything. Rowan answered patiently, though Alara could see how tired he was. Lena helped Alara clean up, both of them quiet. Are you mad at him? The girl asked finally. I don't know what I am. He came back. That's what matters, right? Alara looked at Lena, this girl who'd learned too young that people left and didn't return, who'd built her whole life around the fear of abandonment. Yes, Alara said. That's what matters. But later, after the children were asleep and Rowan was washing up outside, she went to him. You can't do that again. He paused, water dripping from his face. Do what? Risk yourself like that. Tackle armed men off horses, any of it. Alara, do you have any idea what it was like? Waiting, not knowing if you were alive or dead, trying to keep things together for the children while imagining you bleeding out somewhere. Rowan straightened, his expression troubled. I had to go, those cattle. I know you had to go, I understand that. But you didn't have to be a hero. You didn't have to put yourself in the most danger. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to protect what's ours. And what about protecting yourself? Protecting us from losing you. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I didn't think. That's right. You didn't think. She stepped closer, needing him to see her. You have people depending on you now, Rowan. Not just me. Those children in there worship you. Jace follows you around like a shadow. Lena watches every move you make, trying to figure out if you're safe to trust. And you ride off and nearly get yourself killed over cattle. It's not just cattle, it's our future. What future? The words burst out of her. The one where you're dead and I'm trying to explain to 2 traumatized children why another person they cared about is gone. Rowan flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Life isn't fair, but you don't get to be reckless anymore. You don't get to make decisions like you're the only one affected. They stood facing each other in the darkness, both breathing hard. I'm sorry, Rowan said finally. You're right. I should have been more careful. Promise me. Next time something like this happens, you think before you act. You remember what you have to come home to. I promise. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he understood, but she'd learned the hard way that promises were just words until they were tested. Go inside, she said, suddenly exhausted. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Rowan hesitated, then nodded and headed for the barn. Rowan, he turned. I'm glad you came back. Something softened in his expression. Me too. Summer brought new challenges. The partnership meant more cattle, which meant more grazing land needed. Rowan and Frank started talking about expanding further, buying adjacent parcels if they could afford it. Alara found herself pulled into the business side. She'd always been good with numbers. It was one of the few skills her mother had taught her before dying. Now she applied that skill to tracking cattle, calculating costs, figuring out what they could afford and what they couldn't. We need better fencing, she told Rowan one evening, showing him the figures she'd worked out. The north pasture loses too many cattle to strays. If we invest in proper fencing now, we'll save money in the long run. Rowan studied her calculations. This is good, really good. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, just impressed. He looked up at her. You've got a mind for this. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. They ordered the fencing, spent 2 weeks putting it up, the whole family working together. Even Jace helped, carrying posts that were nearly as big as he was. The work was hard, but there was something satisfying about it, about building something tangible, making the land better, stronger. One afternoon while they were working, Lena asked, "Are we rich now?" Rowan laughed, a rare, genuine sound. "No, sweetheart. We're just a little less poor." "But we have enough?" "We have enough," Alara confirmed. "We're not worried about winter anymore." Lena smiled. Good. It was such a small thing, but for a girl who'd gone hungry, who'd wondered where her next meal would come from, knowing there would be enough was everything. In late July, a letter arrived. Not from Thomas this time. From a lawyer in Helena. Alora opened it with trembling hands, Rowan reading over her shoulder. It was short, formal. Thomas had died 3 weeks ago in California. Fever, apparently. He'd listed Alora as his next of kin, though there was no estate to speak of, just notification of death. Alora read it twice, waiting to feel something. Grief. Relief. Anger. Instead, she felt nothing, just a dull emptiness where her brother used to be. "Are you all right?" Rowan asked. "I don't know." She set the letter down. "He was my brother. I should feel something." "Maybe you already grieved him when he sold you." Maybe. That made sense. She'd lost Thomas long before he died. This was just making it official. "Do you want to go to California? Pay respects or—" "No." The answer came immediately. "No, there's nothing there for me. This is my home now." Rowan nodded, understanding. That night, Alora stood outside under the stars, thinking about family. About the one she'd been born into and the one she'd chosen. Thomas was gone. Their parents were gone. The family she'd known as a child had disappeared like smoke. But inside the cabin, Lena and Jace slept soundly, and Rowan sat at the table working on accounts, his steady presence a comfort she'd stopped questioning. This was her family now. Imperfect, cobbled together, built on necessity and choice in equal measure, but real, and worth more than anything she'd lost. August brought Sarah Tillman more often. She'd taken a liking to Alora, would ride over every week or so with some excuse, extra preserves, an old dress Lena might like, advice on dealing with stubborn chickens. But really, Alora suspected, she was checking on them, making sure this young woman thrust into frontier life was managing. "You're doing well," Sarah said one afternoon, watching Alora efficiently separate milk. "Better than most would. I had good teachers." Alora gestured toward where Rowan was working with Jace on saddle repair. "And no choice but to learn. Still, not everyone adapts. Some women come out here and just break, especially ones who didn't choose it." Alora paused. "How did you know?" "That you didn't choose this?" Sarah smiled gently. "Women who choose frontier life have a different look. You had the look of someone trapped. Don't anymore, though." "No?" "No. Now you look like someone who's found where they belong." The words settled over Alora like a blanket. Because Sarah was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped feeling like exile and started feeling like home. "Can I ask you something?" Alora said. "How do you make it work? Marriage out here, it's so hard, so isolating." Sarah considered the question. "You make it work by working at it, by choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She looked at Alora shrewdly. "You and Rowan getting along better?" "We're finding our way. He's a good man, quiet, but good. You could do worse. That's what everyone keeps telling me." "You don't believe it?" Alora thought about that, about Rowan's steady patience with the children, the way he'd listened when she'd challenged him about the rustlers, how he'd agreed to keep Lena and Jace despite his fears. "I believe it," she said. "I just don't know what to do with it." Sarah laughed. "You don't have to do anything with it. Just let it be, and let him be good to you. Let yourself be good to him. The rest will follow." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. People make it complicated, but at the core, it's simple. Do you trust him?" "Yes." "Do you respect him?" "Yes." "Can you imagine your life without him in it?" Alora opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't. When had that happened? When had Rowan become so woven into her daily existence that imagining him gone felt like imagining herself without air? "No," she whispered. Sarah smiled. "Then you already know what you're doing. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." That night, Alora couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed, the one Rowan had given her that first night and never reclaimed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Sarah's words. Can you imagine your life without him? No, she couldn't. But that terrified her, because needing someone meant they could hurt you, could leave, could die chasing rustlers or get kicked by a horse, or any of the 1,000 ways people died out here. A sound from outside pulled her from her thoughts. Footsteps. Then a soft knock. "Alara? You awake?" She sat up. "Yes. What's wrong?" Nothing's wrong. Can I come in? It's your cabin. The door opened. Rowan stood there, silhouetted by moonlight, looking uncertain. Can't sleep? He asked. No, you? No. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I keep thinking about what you said about the rustlers, about having people who depend on me. Rowan, we don't have to Yes, we do. He moved closer, his face serious. You were right. I was reckless. And not just that day. I've been reckless with everything, with us. What do you mean? He gestured around the cabin. This, the partnership, keeping the children, all of it. I've just been doing, not thinking about what it means, what we're building. We're building a life. Are we? He looked at her intently. Because sometimes it feels like we're just two people going through motions, living parallel instead of together. Alara's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I sleep in the barn every night like a hired hand. I'm saying we barely talk about anything that matters. I'm saying we built this family and this partnership and this whole life, but we've never talked about what we are to each other. We're married. On paper. Because I needed land and you needed escape. But is that still what this is? The question hung in the air between them. Alara thought about the past months, about learning to trust him, about the way her heart had stopped when he rode off with the posse, about how she'd started thinking of this place as home and him as... No, she said quietly. That's not what this is anymore. Then what is it? She stood, moving closer to him, close enough to see his expression in the dim light, close enough to touch, though she didn't. I don't know, she admitted. But I know I was terrified when you left. I know I count on you every day. I know when I think about the future, you're in it, and I know... Her voice wavered. I know I don't want to keep living like roommates who happen to share responsibilities. Neither do I. They stood there, inches apart, years of careful distance between them. So what do we do? Alara asked. Rowan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek. We try, he said. We stop hiding in routines and actually try to be what we've been pretending to be. And if we fail, then we fail. But at least we'll have tried. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. The touch sent warmth cascading through her. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. Of what? Of wanting this too much. Of finally having something good and losing it. His eyes searched hers. Of not being enough for you. The confession broke something open in her chest. You are enough, she said. You've always been enough. I just didn't want to admit how much I needed you to be. Rowan's hand slid to the back of her neck, his forehead resting against hers. We're going to have to figure this out as we go, he murmured. I don't know how to do this. How to be a real husband, a real father. I've been making it up the whole time. So have I. Then we'll make it up together. Alara closed the final distance between them, her lips finding his. The kiss was tentative at first, uncertain. Two people learning each other after months of careful avoidance. Then something shifted, deepened. All the unspoken feelings, all the careful restraint, all the moments of almost, it all poured into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers again. Stay, Alara whispered. Don't go back to the barn. You sure? Yes. So he stayed. And for the first time since their wedding day, they fell asleep in the same bed. Not out of obligation or arrangement, but out of choice. Because they wanted to. Because somehow, against all odds, this marriage of survival had become something real. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee already brewing. Alara woke slowly, disoriented by the warmth beside her. For a moment, she couldn't remember why the bed felt different. Then memory flooded back, Rowan's confession, the kiss, falling asleep with his arm around her waist. She turned her head. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. She felt suddenly self-conscious. How long have you been awake? A while. Didn't want to move and wake you. You could have. I need to start breakfast anyway. Already done. Coffee's on. Biscuits are warming. Alara blinked. You made breakfast? Don't sound so shocked. I can manage biscuits. A small smile tugged at his mouth, though they're probably not as good as yours. She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything gold. It felt like waking into a different life. Rowan, if you're about to say last night was a mistake, I wasn't. She looked at him directly. I was going to say we should probably talk about what happens now. He nodded slowly. Probably. But neither of them moved. They sat there in the quiet morning, the weight of change settling around them like dust. Finally, Rowan spoke. I don't want to go back to how things were, sleeping in the barn, keeping distance, but I also don't want to force something that needs time. So what do you want? He considered the question. I want to try being married for real, not just on paper. I want to eat meals together and talk about our days and sleep in the same bed because we want to, not because we have to. He paused. I want to stop being afraid of wanting that. Alara's throat tightened. I want that too. Yeah? Yeah. She reached for his hand, but we're going to mess it up sometimes. We're going to fight and get frustrated and not know what we're doing. Probably. And the children are going to notice. They're going to have questions. Let them ask. We'll figure it out together. His thumb traced circles on her palm. That's what families do, right? Figure things out as they go. Before Alara could answer, the door burst open. Rowan, there's a... Jace froze, taking in the scene. Rowan and Alara in bed together, clearly just waking up. His eyes went wide. Oh. Morning, Jace, Rowan said calmly, as if this were completely normal. You slept in here? I did. How come? Rowan glanced at Alara, then back at the boy. Because this is where I belong, with my wife. Jace processed this, his young face serious. Then, does this mean you're staying for good? Not going back to the barn? If that's all right with you and your sister. A grin split Jace's face. It's all right with me. Lena said you should have been sleeping in here all along anyway. She said it was weird that you didn't. Alara laughed despite herself. Did she now? Uh-huh. She said married people are supposed to... He paused, clearly trying to remember the exact words. Act like they actually like each other. Smart girl, Rowan muttered. So what did you need? Alara asked. You came running in here about something? Oh, right. There's a wagon coming up the road. Big one, with people. Rowan was out of bed immediately, moving to the window. Alara joined him, peering out at the approaching wagon. It was indeed large, covered with canvas, pulled by 4 horses. And perched on the driver's seat was a woman Alara had never seen before. Middle-aged, sturdy-looking, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. You expecting someone? Alara asked. No. They dressed quickly and went outside. Lena was already there, standing near the porch with her arms crossed, watching the wagon approach with suspicion. The woman brought the wagon to a halt and climbed down with practiced ease. She looked them over with sharp eyes, taking in the cabin, the children, Rowan and Alara standing close together. This the Hale homestead? She asked. It is, Rowan confirmed. Can we help you? Name's Margaret Porter. I run the Territorial Children's Welfare Office out of Helena. She pulled papers from her bag. Got a report about 2 children living here. Lena and Jace Morrison. That them? Alara's stomach dropped. Lena had gone pale, her hand reaching for Jace automatically. Who reported them? Rowan asked, his voice carefully neutral. Anonymous tip. Someone passing through, sounds like. Said you had children here who weren't yours, wanted to make sure they were being properly cared for. Margaret's eyes swept over Lena and Jace. Are they? Of course they are, Alara said, her voice sharp. They're part of our family. Family? Margaret pulled out a pencil, making notes. But not legally adopted, I'm guessing? No formal paperwork? We found them nearly dead in the woods, Rowan said. We took them in, nursed them back to health, gave them a home. Seemed more important than paperwork at the time. I'm sure it did, but the law requires proper documentation for orphaned children. We need to ensure they're in suitable environments. She looked at the children again. You too. Come here. Lena didn't move. Jace pressed closer to his sister. They're scared, Alara said. They're scared because they don't know me. That's normal. Margaret's tone softened slightly. I'm not here to hurt anyone, just need to ask some questions, see how things are. If everything's good, we'll file the right papers and that'll be that. And if you decide things aren't good, Rowan asked, then I take them back to Helena, place them with a certified family or in the children's home until proper placement can be found. No. The word came from Lina, fierce and sudden. We're not going anywhere, Margaret turned to her. Sweetheart, I know this is scary. You don't know anything. Lina stepped forward, her small frame vibrating with intensity. You don't know what it was like before. You don't know what Alara and Rowan did for us. You don't know. Then tell me. Lina looked back at Alara, her eyes desperate. Alara nodded encouragingly. The girl took a breath. We were starving. Our pa left us and we had nothing. No food, no shelter. Jace was dying. He had fever so bad I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought I was going to lose him. Then Alara found us. She brought us here. They saved us. I see. And since then, they treat you well? They treat us like we matter. Lina's hands clenched into fists. Rowan teaches me and Jace things. How to work the land, how to fix things. Alara makes sure we eat, makes sure we're warm. They gave us a home when we had nothing. Do they ever hurt you, hit you, or... No, Jace burst out. Never. Rowan's nice. He carved me animals and showed me how to ride, and he never yells even when I mess up. And Alara tucks us in and tells us stories and makes good food. They're good. Margaret wrote all of this down, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Rowan and Alara. May I inspect the premises? Of course, Alara said, though her heart was racing. They showed Margaret everything. The cabin, the new addition they'd built for the children, the garden, the livestock. Margaret asked questions constantly about food, education, discipline, future plans. You planning to officially adopt them? She asked. Rowan and Alara exchanged glances. They'd never actually discussed it. The children had just stayed, become part of the family without formal declaration. Yes, Alara said firmly. We want to adopt them, both of them. The process takes time, background checks, home visits, legal fees. We'll do whatever's necessary. Margaret made more notes. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for everyone to join her. Here's the situation, she said. By the letter of the law, you should have reported finding these children immediately, should have brought them to proper authorities. Keeping them without filing papers, that's problematic. Alara felt Rowan tense beside her. However, Margaret continued, I can see they're healthy, happy, being cared for. And from what they've told me, you likely saved their lives. She tapped her pencil against her notepad. So here's what's going to happen. I'm filing an emergency placement order today. That makes you their legal guardians temporarily. Then we start the adoption process. I'll need to do follow-up visits every few months until it's finalized. Can you agree to that? Relief flooded through Alara so suddenly she felt dizzy. Yes, absolutely. Understand this is a commitment. You're taking on full responsibility for 2 children, their well-being, their education, everything. If at any point I find they're not being properly cared for, they will be, Rowan said. We'll make sure of it. Margaret studied them for a long moment. Then she nodded. I believe you will. She pulled out forms. Let's get started on this paperwork. It took hours. Margaret was thorough, asking for every detail, how they'd found the children, their medical history, their current routine. She interviewed Lina and Jace separately, then together. She inspected their sleeping area, their clothes, everything. By the time she climbed back into her wagon, the sun was setting. I'll be back in 3 months, she said. Keep good care of them. We will, Alara promised. They watched the wagon disappear down the road. Then Jace let out a whoop. We get to stay! Lina was crying, quiet tears sliding down her cheeks. Alara pulled her close. You okay? I thought she was going to take us, Lina whispered. I thought we'd have to leave. We wouldn't have let that happen, Rowan said. No matter what. Really? Really. He crouched down to her level. You're ours now, legally and everything else. That means we fight for you. Always. Lina threw her arms around him. Rowan stiffened in surprise, then slowly hugged her back. Over the girl's head, his eyes met Alara's. She saw her own emotion reflected there, fear that had turned to relief, relief turning to something deeper, purpose, commitment, family. They were really doing this. The next months passed in a blur of work and paperwork. The adoption process was even more complicated than Margaret had indicated. Background checks required trips to town for interviews. Legal fees ate into their savings. There were forms for everything: health records, financial stability, character references. Frank and Sarah Tillman provided glowing references. So did the shopkeeper in town, the doctor who'd examined the children, even the preacher who'd married Rowan and Alara. Through it all, they kept working. The partnership with the Tillmans continued to grow. They expanded the herd, bought additional grazing land, hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload. Money wasn't plentiful, but it was steady. Enough to plan for the future instead of just surviving day to day. Alara started teaching Lena and Jace properly: reading, writing, arithmetic. Rowan built them a proper schoolroom in the addition, with a chalkboard he'd traded for and desks he'd made himself. Watching the children bent over their lessons, Alara felt something she'd never expected to feel: pride. Not just in them, but in what she and Rowan had built. This life, this family. None of it had been planned, but all of it mattered. One evening in late autumn, after the children were asleep, Rowan found her standing outside looking at the stars. "Cold night," he said, draping a blanket around her shoulders. "Beautiful, though." He stood beside her, their breath misting in the chill air. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" "What do you mean?" "If I hadn't needed a wife, if your brother hadn't sold you, if we'd never met." Alara considered that. Sometimes. Why? Just wondering if you regret it. Any of it. She turned to look at him. His face was shadowed in the moonlight, but she could see the vulnerability there. The question beneath the question. "Do you?" she asked. "No, not even close." He took her hand. "I know it started wrong. I know you didn't choose this, but standing here now with everything we've built, I wouldn't change it." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They made us figure out who we really were." He squeezed her hand. "Who we could be together." Alara leaned into him, feeling his warmth against the cold night. "I don't regret it either," she said softly. "I hated it at first. Hated you for being part of it, even though you were just trying to survive too. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being the life I was forced into and became the life I chose." "When?" She thought about it. "I don't know exactly. Maybe when we decided to keep the children. Maybe when we became real partners instead of strangers sharing a cabin. Maybe it was gradual, too slow to notice until suddenly I realized I was happy." "Are you? Happy?" "Yes." The word came easily, truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought I'd be." He turned to face her fully. "You know what scares me?" "What?" "How much I need this, need you. I spent so long not needing anyone, not letting myself want things. And now..." "Now you're terrified it'll be taken away," Alara finished. "Yes." "Me too." She reached up, cupping his face. "But we can't live in fear. We've built something real, Rowan. Something that matters. We have to trust it's strong enough to last." He kissed her then, deep and sure. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I should have said it before now, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Alara." Her breath caught. "I love you too." They stood there under the vast Montana sky, 2 people who'd started as strangers and become everything to each other. Winter came hard that year. Snow fell early and heavy, burying the land under white. The cattle huddled in the low pastures. The creek froze solid. Days were short, nights endless. But inside the cabin, warmth prevailed. Rowan had reinforced the walls, added insulation, made sure every crack was sealed. The children's room stayed toasty. Alara kept stew simmering constantly, filling the space with the smell of cooking food. They played games in the evenings: cards, checkers, storytelling contests. Rowan carved more animals for Jace, taught Lena to whittle. Alara read to them from the few books they had, making up new stories when they finished. It should have been isolating, trapped indoors, cut off from town, nothing but family and snow. Instead, it felt perfect. "Tell the one about the bear again," Jace begged one night. Rowan groaned. "You've heard it 10 times." "I don't care, it's the best one." So Rowan told it again, The story of the grizzly he'd encountered on a cattle drive, embellished more with each telling until the bear was practically mythical in size. Lena rolled her eyes. That bear gets bigger every time. That's because I remember more details, Rowan said seriously. That's not how memory works. It's how story memory works. Alara watched them bicker fondly, her heart full. This was what she'd been missing her whole life without knowing it. Not perfection, but realness. Messy, loud, complicated realness. In January, Margaret Porter returned for her follow-up visit. She arrived during a break in the weather, her wagon struggling through the snow-packed roads. Alara saw her coming from a distance and felt her stomach clench with anxiety. What if Margaret had changed her mind? What if she decided the homestead wasn't suitable for children? What if— Stop, Rowan said, touching her arm. She'll see they're fine, we're fine. But what if— Then we'll deal with it, together. Margaret's inspection was even more thorough than the first. She questioned the children extensively, checked their schoolwork, examined their living conditions. They've grown, she noted, both of them, Lena especially. We've been making sure they eat well, Alara said. I can see that. Margaret made notes. And their education? Alara showed her the schoolroom, the children's work. Margaret flipped through Lena's writing samples, Jace's arithmetic. This is good work. Better than some schoolhouses I've seen. Alara's a good teacher, Lena said quietly. Margaret smiled. I'm sure she is. After hours of inspection, Margaret sat them all down again. I'm approving the adoption, she said. Final papers should be ready by spring. The relief was staggering. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. You did the work. Margaret looked at Rowan and Alara seriously. You saved these children. Gave them a real chance at life. That matters. After she left, Jace asked, Does this mean it's official? We're really your kids? Not official until spring, Rowan said. But yes, really and truly. Good. Jace climbed into Rowan's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. I like being yours. Lena caught Alara's eye and smiled. A real, full smile that transformed her entire face. Alara smiled back, her heart so full it ached. Spring arrived with a rush. The snow melted, revealing muddy earth that slowly dried and greened. Wildflowers exploded across the hillsides. The cattle spread out to graze on fresh grass. Calves were born, healthy, strong, more than they'd hoped for. The partnership was thriving. Frank proposed expanding even further, maybe buying the old Henderson place that had recently become available. It's a risk, Rowan said, discussing it with Alara one evening, but a calculated one. We'd have room to triple our herd. Can we afford it? He showed her the numbers. It would be tight, but possible. What do you think? He asked. Alara studied the figures, thinking about risk and reward, about building something bigger than survival. I think we should do it, she said. We didn't come this far to play it safe. Rowan grinned. No, we didn't. They bought the Henderson place in April, expanded the partnership to officially include both properties, hired more help, started planning for a future that stretched beyond just making it through another winter. The final adoption papers arrived in May. Alara held the official documents with shaking hands, legal proof that Lena and Jace were theirs. Really, truly theirs. We should celebrate, Rowan said. So they did. Nothing fancy, just a special dinner with cake Sarah had helped Alara make. But the children's faces glowed with happiness. Does this mean our last name is Hale now? Jace asked. If you want it to be, Alara said. I want it to be. He looked at Lena. You? Lena nodded. Yeah, I want it to be. Then it is, Rowan said. Lena and Jace Hale. Official as it gets. That night, after the children were asleep, Alara and Rowan sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky. We did it, she said softly. We did. When I first came here, I thought I'd lost everything. My family, my future, my choice in how to live my life. She leaned against him. I was wrong. I didn't lose those things. I just found them in a different place. Rowan's arm tightened around her. I thought I'd always be alone, that after losing my brother, I didn't deserve family, didn't deserve happiness. And now? Now I know that's not how life works. You don't earn good things by being perfect. You get them by being brave enough to try, by choosing to build instead of hide. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky deepen from pink to purple to star-scattered black. What do you think happens next? Alara asked. More of this. More work, more challenges. The kids will grow up. We'll grow old. The land will throw everything it has at us, and we'll keep fighting. Sounds exhausting. Probably will be. He kissed the top of her head. But we'll do it together. That makes all the difference. Time moved forward the way it does on the frontier, measured in seasons and cattle drives and children's growth. Jace shot up like a weed, all gangly limbs and boundless energy. By age 10, he could rope as well as most grown men. By 12, he was helping run the cattle. By 15, he was talking about expanding into horse breeding. Lena grew quieter, but stronger. She took to the land in ways that surprised everyone, developing an instinct for weather and animals that rivaled Rowan's. She started keeping detailed records of the cattle, tracking bloodlines and weights with meticulous precision. "You've got a mind for a business," Frank told her one day. "You ought to think about taking over operations someday." Lena just smiled, but Alara saw the pride in her eyes. The homestead expanded. They built a proper house, 2 stories, with real glass windows and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The old cabin became a bunkhouse for the ranch hands they now employed year-round. The partnership with the Tillmans evolved into one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market crashes and disease, but they weathered them together, the 2 families supporting each other through everything. Sarah became like a mother to Alara, teaching her things her own mother never had the chance to. Frank and Rowan became true friends, not just business partners. And through it all, Alara and Rowan's relationship deepened. They fought sometimes, about money, about decisions, about how to handle the children. But they always came back together, always talked it through, always chose each other. "You know what I'm grateful for?" Alara said one evening. They were sitting on the porch of the new house watching Lena and Jace race horses across the pasture. "What?" "That we had to build this from nothing. If it had been easy, if we'd just fallen into happiness without working for it, I don't think it would mean as much." Rowan considered that. "You think struggle makes things more valuable?" "I think effort makes things more valuable. We put everything into this, our fear, our hope, our work. We chose it every single day. That matters." He took her hand, studying the scars and calluses that marked years of hard living. "You ever miss the easier life? Before all this?" Alara laughed. "What easier life? My life before this was being sold off by my brother. There was nothing easy about it." "You know what I mean. Life where you didn't have to work so hard just to survive." She thought about it honestly. "No, I don't miss it. This life is hard, but it's mine, ours. We built it with our own hands. Nobody can take that away." Years accumulated like snow, gradual but transformative. Jace married at 22, bringing home a spirited young woman named Claire, who fit into the family like she'd always been there. They built a house on the east section of the property and started their own herd. Lena surprised everyone by not marrying. "I don't need a husband," she told Alara. "I've got the ranch. That's enough." And it was. She took over more and more of the operations as Rowan's joints started to ache and his movement slowed. She was good at it, better than good. Under her management, the ranch thrived. Alara watched her daughter, because that's what Lena was, adoption papers or not, handle business with neighboring ranchers and felt fierce pride. This girl who'd been found half dead in the woods had grown into a force of nature. One afternoon, Lena came to Alara with a proposal. "I want to start teaching," she said. "Teaching what?" "Kids. The ranch families out here, they don't have schools. Their children work instead of learning. I want to change that." Alara's throat tightened. "That's a wonderful idea." "You think so? I know it'll take time away from ranch work." "Lena," Alara stopped her. "You don't need my permission. You're a grown woman. But for what it's worth, I think it's perfect. You'll be amazing at it." Lena smiled, that same transformative smile that still made Alara's heart squeeze. "Will you help me? With lesson planning and everything?" "Of course." So they built a schoolhouse on the property, small but sturdy, with desks Rowan and Jace constructed. Lena taught children from all the surrounding ranches, giving them the education she'd once been denied. Watching her daughter teach, seeing the same patience and care Alara had shown her reflected back, it felt like closing a circle. Rowan aged more gracefully than he probably deserved. His hair went gray, then white. His face lined deeply. His hands, those capable hands that had built so much, developed arthritis that made detailed work painful. But his eyes stayed sharp, his mind stayed clear, and his love for his family never wavered. On their 20th anniversary, 20 years from that silent, loveless wedding in town, Alara found him sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "Thinking deep thoughts?" she asked, settling beside him. "Just remembering." "What?" "Our wedding day. How terrified we both were. How wrong it all seemed." Alara took his hand, feeling the familiar roughness of his palm. "And now? Now I can't imagine it any other way." He looked at her, really looked at her. "You know what the best decision I ever made was? Buying this land? No. Promising you I'd give you a reason to smile." He touched her face gently. "Because in trying to keep that promise, I found everything I didn't know I needed." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. "You did keep it, you know, that promise." "Did I?" "Yes." She smiled at him, full, genuine, the kind of smile that came from deep contentment. "Every single day." The years continued their steady march. Rowan's health declined slowly but inevitably. His breathing grew labored, his steps slowed, but he refused to give up, insisted on being part of ranch life, even when it was just sitting on the porch giving directions. Alara stayed by his side through all of it. They'd built this life together. She'd see it through to the end with him. One evening in late summer, when the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, Rowan called the family together. Jace and Claire came with their 3 children. Lena closed the school early. They all gathered on the porch, sensing something important. Rowan looked at them all, his family, built from nothing but choice and commitment. "I want you to know," he said, his voice rough but steady, "that I'm proud of all of you. Proud of what we built here. This wasn't supposed to be my life, wasn't supposed to be any of our lives, but it became the best thing I could have hoped for." "Pa," Jace started. "Let me finish," Rowan smiled. "I'm not dying tonight, but I'm old and I'm tired, and I want to say this while I can. You all made me better than I was, gave me purpose when I had none, taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. Every day. Even when it's hard." He looked at Alara. "Especially when it's hard." Alara's vision blurred with tears. "Take care of each other," Rowan continued. "Keep this place going, not because you have to, but because it means something, because we built it to last." They promised, all of them. Rowan lived another 2 years, long enough to see his grandchildren grow, to watch Lena's school expand, to know the ranch would continue after him. He died on a clear autumn morning, Alara holding his hand, the window open so he could hear the wind in the grass one last time. "I love you," Alara whispered. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Rowan squeezed her hand weakly. "Thank you for letting me try." Then he was gone. The grief was immense, all-consuming. Alara had known it was coming, had tried to prepare, but nothing could prepare for the loss of someone who'd become so fundamentally part of her existence. But she didn't break, because Rowan had taught her how to be strong, how to keep going even when it hurt, how to build something that lasted beyond just one person. The ranch continued. Lena and Jace ran it together, each bringing their own strengths. The school thrived, the grandchildren grew. Life moved forward the way it always did, carrying loss and joy in equal measure. Alara lived for another 15 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren, to watch the ranch expand further, to know that what she and Rowan had built would outlast them both. She taught the young ones, passing down stories and skills. She helped in the garden until her joints protested too much. She sat on the porch and watched the land she'd grown to love, the land that had saved her in ways she'd never expected. On her final evening, Lena sat with her. "Are you afraid?" her daughter asked. Alara considered the question. "No, I've had a good life, better than I ever thought possible." "You and Pa, you built something real here." "We did, but we couldn't have done it without you and Jace. You gave us purpose, gave us a reason to be more than we were." Lena's eyes filled with tears. You saved us. No, sweetheart. We saved each other. Alara squeezed her hand. That's what families do. They save each other over and over, in small ways and big ones. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. But I'll still be here. In the land, in the house, in everything we built. That doesn't disappear just because I do. That night, with the stars bright overhead and the familiar sounds of the ranch settling in for evening, Alara closed her eyes and let go. And somewhere she could swear she heard Rowan's voice. I kept my promise, she whispered to the darkness. I found my reason to smile. The ranch stands still, generations later. The original cabin is preserved as a historical landmark. The house Rowan built has been expanded and modernized, but the bones remain the same. The school Lena founded still operates, teaching children who worked the land their ancestors claimed. And on the porch, where Rowan and Alara spent countless evenings watching the sunset, there's a plaque. It reads simply, "Here stood two people who chose to build instead of break. May we all be so brave." Because that's what they did in the end. Two broken people, thrust together by circumstance, who chose to build something stronger than survival, who chose commitment over comfort, growth over safety, love over fear. They taught everyone who came after that family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, about doing the hard work of being present, being honest, being willing to change. It's about keeping promises, even small ones, especially small ones, like promising to give someone a reason to smile and spending a lifetime making good on that vow. The land remains. The legacy endures. And somewhere in the wind that sweeps across the Montana grasslands, there's the echo of a promise kept, a life well lived, a love that built something stronger than stone. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered.